The plane was falling. The captain said they would all die. Everyone screamed. Then a woman passenger stood up. She walked to the cockpit. She revealed a shocking secret: she was a former fighter pilot. In 10 minutes, she would save 241 lives with impossible flying skills. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun was shining when Flight 2847 left the airport. It was a Boeing 777. A big commercial airplane. The kind of airplane that carries families on vacation. Business people going to meetings. Old people visiting their grandchildren. There were 241 passengers on this flight. The airplane climbed into the sky very smoothly. Everything seemed perfect. The engines were running normally. The weather was clear. The pilots were experienced. Everything was going according to plan. The flight attendants served drinks and snacks. Passengers watched movies on their screens. Some people slept. Some people read books. Some people looked out the windows at the clouds below them. 2 hours into the flight, the airplane was at 37,000 feet. This is very high in the sky. The air is thin here. The temperature is extremely cold outside the windows. But inside the airplane, it was comfortable and warm. At this height, the plane was cruising at 35,000 feet. The engines were working perfectly. The autopilot was turned on. The pilots did not need to do much. They just monitored the systems. They checked the instruments. They made sure everything was working correctly. Captain Marcus Webb was sitting in the left seat of the cockpit. He was the senior pilot. The pilot in command. The person responsible for the safety of everyone on the plane. Marcus was 52 years old. He had been flying commercial airplanes for 23 years. He had logged over 18,000 hours of flying time. He had flown to more than 100 countries. He had seen almost every kind of weather. He had handled engine failures before. He had managed hydraulic problems. He had landed planes safely in thunderstorms. But Marcus had never seen what was about to happen. Beside him sat First Officer Sarah Chen. She was 29 years old. Sarah had been flying for only 4 years. But she was excellent at her job. She was smart. She was quick thinking. She had good instincts. She wanted to become a captain like Marcus one day. Everything changed in 1 second. Boom! The explosion happened without warning. It was not like a crash. It was more like a giant hammer hitting the side of the airplane. The whole plane shook violently. Drinks spilled. People fell forward in their seats. Luggage fell from the overhead bins. In the cockpit, alarms started screaming. Red warning lights lit up all over the instrument panel. The warning system was telling the pilots that something very bad had happened. Engine 2. Sarah shouted. Engine number 2 is failing. Marcus looked at his screens. His experienced eyes scanned the information quickly. What he saw made his chest tight. The number 2 engine had suffered a catastrophic failure. Inside the engine, a compressor blade had broken. This blade is a metal part that normally spins very fast to compress air. When it broke, it created a chain reaction of destruction. The broken blade was like a bullet ricocheting inside the engine. It hit other parts. Those parts broke too. Then those broken parts hit other things. The destruction spread through the engine like a wildfire. Metal fragments, pieces of titanium, were being thrown at incredible speeds through the engine. These fragments were hitting things they were never designed to hit. They were puncturing walls. They were cutting through pipes. They were breaking everything in their path. The fragments were not contained inside the engine anymore. They were punching through the engine walls and hitting other systems in the plane. Hydraulic lines were being cut. Hydraulic fluid is used to control the plane's flight surfaces. Without it, the pilots cannot make the plane turn. Without it, the pilots cannot make the plane go up or down properly. Electrical wires were also being cut. These wires carry electricity to important systems. Without electricity, the systems cannot work. Marcus could see on his screens that they had lost most of their electrical power. The lights in the cockpit were flickering. Some screens went dark. Some screens still showed information, but the information was not complete. "We've lost primary power," Marcus said calmly, even though he was not calm inside. "We're on battery backup." He tried to move the control stick. The control stick is like a big wheel in front of the pilot. When the pilot pulls it back, the plane goes up. When the pilot pushes it forward, the plane goes down. When the pilot turns it left or right, the plane turns. But the control stick was not responding properly. It was very hard to move. It moved only a tiny bit even when Marcus pulled with all his strength. This meant they had lost the hydraulic systems. Without hydraulic power, the control surfaces cannot move smoothly. The pilot has to fight the plane to make it move. "Sarah," Marcus said. "Check the hydraulic status." Sarah looked at the gauges. Her face went pale. "Hydraulic 1 is at 0, she said quietly. Hydraulic 2 is at 0. Only hydraulic 3 has any fluid left, and it is only at 10% capacity. They had 3 hydraulic systems. Now 2 were completely empty. The third one had almost no fluid left. Marcus knew what this meant. They had almost no control of the plane anymore. The airplane was becoming uncontrollable. The instrument panel was showing more and more red lights. Every light meant something had broken. Every light meant one less system working. "Number 2 engine fire warning," Sarah said. Through the window, Marcus could see it. There were flames coming from the number 2 engine. The fire was orange and yellow. It was very bright. It was very hot. The engine fire was burning through metal. It was burning through protective walls. It was getting closer and closer to the fuel tanks that were stored in the wings. If the fire reached those fuel tanks, the whole airplane would explode. Marcus did the calculations in his mind. He looked at the altitude. He looked at the speed. He looked at the control authority he had left. He calculated the distance to the nearest airport. The numbers told him a terrible story. They were too far from any airport. Even if they could fly in a straight line at full speed, they would not reach any airport before the electrical system failed completely. Once the electrical system died, they would have no power. No lights. No navigation. Nothing. Plus, the backup hydraulic system would not give them enough control to make the sharp turns needed to reach an airport. They could turn slightly. But they could not make emergency maneuvers. The fire was burning hotter. It was getting closer to the fuel tanks. When it reached the fuel, the plane would explode. They had maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes before everything became impossible. No. Not 10 minutes. More like 8 or 9 minutes. Marcus had been trained his whole career to stay calm in emergencies. He had been trained to look for solutions. He had been trained to believe that there was always a way. But this time, there was no way. This time, the physics of the situation was clear and absolute. The damage was too severe. The systems were too broken. The time was too short. The distance was too far. Everyone on this plane was going to die. Marcus thought about all the people sitting in the cabin behind him. He thought about the families. He thought about the children. He thought about the old people. He thought about the business people who were supposed to be at meetings tomorrow. He thought about the young people who were supposed to see their loved ones. All of them were going to die. And it was his responsibility. He was the captain. He was supposed to protect them. He was supposed to get them safely to their destination. He was supposed to be the expert who could handle anything. But he could not handle this. Marcus made a decision that would break every rule of aviation. Every pilot is taught to keep passenger confidence. Every pilot is taught to project calm authority. Every pilot is taught to never admit defeat. But Marcus decided to tell the truth. He pressed the button to talk to the passengers. His hand was steady as he did this, but his heart was breaking. "This is your captain speaking," he said. His voice came through the speakers in the cabin. Everyone went quiet. 241 people stopped talking. They stopped moving. They waited to hear what their captain would say. "I need to be completely honest with you about our situation," Marcus continued. His voice was steady and clear, even though he was experiencing the worst moment of his life. "We have experienced a catastrophic failure in our number 2 engine. This failure has damaged multiple critical systems." He paused. He took a breath. "We have lost most of our hydraulic power. We have lost most of our electrical power. We have an engine fire that we cannot extinguish. We have minimal control of the aircraft. And we are too far from any airport to reach it with our current capabilities." Another pause. Longer this time. "I have been flying commercial aircraft for 23 years, Marcus said. "I have handled many emergencies. I have fixed many problems. I know when a situation is survivable and when it is not. This situation is not survivable." The cabin was completely silent. Everyone was listening to their captain tell them they were going to die. "I am very sorry," Marcus said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "I wish I had better news. I wish I could tell you that we would make it. But I cannot lie to you. You deserve the truth. You deserve to know. We have maybe 10 minutes before our electrical system fails completely. After that, we will lose all control. We will fall from the sky." Some people started crying immediately. Others seemed frozen in shock. "Use whatever time we have left however you need to," Marcus said. "Call your families if the phones still work. Tell them you love them. Tell them goodbye. Say your prayers if that gives you comfort. I am deeply sorry. I am so very sorry." The microphone went off. And then the screaming started. In seat 17C, a woman in jeans and a simple gray sweater was sitting by the window. Her name was Elena Valkov. She was 42 years old. She had brown hair pulled back in a simple bun. She wore no makeup. She carried no identification that said who she really was. To everyone around her, she was just another passenger. Just another ordinary traveler on a commercial flight. But Elena Valkov was not ordinary. She had heard the explosion when the engine failed. Most people heard it and felt confused. They did not know what the sound meant. But Elena recognized it immediately. She had heard that sound many, many times before. In situations where people were trying to kill her. She had been a military fighter pilot. Elena had spent 12 years flying fighter jets for the Russian Air Force. She had flown the Sukhoi Su-35. This is one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. It is small and light and incredibly fast. It can fly at speeds over 2,000 kilometers per hour. It can turn sharply and fight other planes in aerial combat. Elena had flown combat missions in Syria. She had flown in Ukraine. She had flown in places that government documents officially denied existed. She had 2,000 hours of combat flying time. This means she had been shot at for 2,000 hours. It means other pilots had tried to kill her 2,000 hours worth of time. It means missiles had been launched at her. It means she had been in the air when explosions happened near her. She had been shot down once. Over a city called Aleppo in Syria, an anti-aircraft missile had hit her Su-35. The missile struck her left engine. The impact destroyed the engine completely. The explosion punched holes through her wing. Hydraulic fluid started leaking everywhere. Her plane was crippled. But Elena did not eject. She did not abandon her aircraft. Instead, she flew it on one engine. She flew at 60 kilometers back to her military base. She flew for over an hour with one engine dead and half her instruments destroyed. People told her later that it should have been impossible. But she did it. That was 18 months ago. After that experience, Elena decided she was tired. She was tired of war. She was tired of combat. She was tired of being shot at. She was tired of killing people. She was tired of seeing other pilots die. So she retired from the military. For 18 months, she had been living a quiet civilian life. She worked as a consultant for companies. She traveled around the world. She went to places where nobody knew who she was. She went to places where nobody knew about her military past. She wanted to be invisible. But now, sitting in seat 17C, Elena heard Captain Marcus Webb say that everyone on the plane was going to die. And Elena knew something that Captain Webb did not know. She knew that, going to die, and, impossible to survive, were not the same thing. In her 12 years of military service, Elena had learned something very important. She had learned that the words, impossible, and unsurvivable, were just words. They were words that people used when they did not know how to solve a problem. But just because they did not know how to solve it did not mean there was no solution. Elena had learned this from experience. She had been in situations where ground control had told her it was impossible to bring her plane home. But she had brought it home anyway. She had flown aircraft that were so damaged that people said there was no way they could still fly. But they had flown. Elena stood up from her seat. Around her, passengers were screaming. Parents were holding their children. Strangers were holding hands. People were saying goodbye to each other. People were praying. But Elena was calm. She was not scared. She had been scared in actual combat, when real bullets were flying at her. This was not as scary as that. Elena walked toward the front of the plane. Most passengers did not even notice her. They were too busy being terrified. Some passengers thought maybe she was having a breakdown. Some passengers thought maybe she was trying to reach the bathroom because she did not understand they were all about to die. Nobody realized she was walking toward the cockpit. Nobody realized she was about to change everything. Elena reached the cockpit door. The door is very thick and very strong. It is locked at all times during flight. Nobody can open it from outside. But there is an intercom system. Elena pressed the button and spoke into the microphone. "My name is Elena Valkov," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. It was the voice of someone who was used to making decisions under pressure. "I am a former fighter pilot with 12 years of combat experience. I have flown 2,000 hours in combat. I have survived engine failures. I have survived hydraulic failures. I have survived damage that should have killed me." She paused. She let that information sink in. "I know what you are facing," Elena continued. "I know it seems impossible. But I also know that impossible often just means nobody has tried the right solution. Open this door. Let me help you. Or we all die anyway. So what do you have to lose?" Inside the cockpit, the head flight attendant named James Morrison heard her voice through the intercom. At first, he thought she was crazy. Why would a passenger want to come to the cockpit? That did not make sense. But James was smart enough to realize something: they were all going to die anyway. What was the harm in listening to her? James went to Captain Marcus. He told him what the woman said. Marcus looked at all his screens. Red lights everywhere. Alarms ringing. The instruments showing that every system was failing. The aircraft falling slowly but inexorably toward the ground. He had nothing to lose. Nothing at all. Tell her to come in, Marcus said. The cockpit door unlocked. Elena stepped inside the small room. She was wearing simple jeans and a sweater. She was wearing running shoes. She looked like a regular passenger. But her eyes were different. Her eyes showed the experience of someone who had been through many dangerous situations. Elena immediately looked at all the instruments. Her eyes scanned across the screens. Her brain processed the information. She understood the situation in less than 5 seconds. Show me what control authority you have left, Elena said. Her voice carried the authority of someone who was used to giving orders. Marcus moved the control stick. The airplane responded very slowly. Very sluggishly. It moved only a little bit even when he pulled hard. Elena nodded. She was thinking. She was calculating. She was creating a plan. Okay, Elena said. First thing. We reduce the weight of the aircraft. How much fuel are you carrying? 42,000 pounds, Sarah said. We were only 2 hours into an 8-hour flight. Dump it, Elena said. All of it. Right now. But the regulations, Sarah said. Dumping fuel over populated areas violates environmental rules. The FAA will. The FAA will investigate a crash site if we do nothing, Elena interrupted. Dump the fuel. Marcus was already reaching for the fuel dump switches. Elena was right. Environmental regulations did not matter if everyone died. There would be no one left to punish. The switches moved to the dump position. Jet fuel started pouring out of the wings of the airplane. Thousands and thousands of gallons of kerosene began streaming into the atmosphere. It created beautiful vapor trails behind the aircraft. To anyone watching from the ground, it would have looked like the airplane was leaking. Fuel quantity dropping, Sarah reported. 42,000, 40,000. 38,000 pounds. The weight was coming off the aircraft. The plane was becoming lighter. Much lighter. Elena was thinking about the physics of the situation. A heavier aircraft needs more force to move the control surfaces. A lighter aircraft needs less force. With minimal hydraulic power, they needed the aircraft to be as light as possible. When we get the fuel down to about 8,000 pounds, we stop the dump, Elena said. That will be enough to reach an airport with a long runway. What is the nearest suitable field? Sarah was already checking the navigation display. Peterson Air Force Base, she said. 80 nautical miles northeast. Runway 13, which is 13,500 feet long. We can make it if we maintain current heading and descent rate. But the descent will have to be very steep. Military base is perfect, Elena said. Call them immediately. Tell them we are a civilian Boeing 777. Tell them we have catastrophic systems failure and minimal control authority. Tell them a former military pilot is advising us. Tell them to expect us in 18 minutes. Tell them we need emergency equipment staged and ready. Marcus keyed the radio while Sarah coordinated with Peterson's control tower. She explained their situation. The tower controllers did not ask many questions. They did not require standard procedures. They simply cleared all other traffic. They positioned emergency equipment along the runway. They told the aircraft they were cleared for emergency landing. The aircraft was now much lighter. Fuel was still pouring out of the wings. The descent had to begin soon. Elena looked at the altitude. They were at 34,000 feet. They needed to get down to 10,000 feet where the air was thicker and the remaining hydraulic power would be more effective. We are going to descend, Elena said. But not the way your normal procedures teach. Commercial training says descent should be gradual and smooth. We are going to do something different. We are going to do what military pilots call a forward slip. A forward slip? Marcus said. He sounded shocked. In a 777? That is a maneuver for small aircraft. The 777 is not designed for that. We could overspeed. We could break the structure. Your aircraft is also not designed to survive catastrophic system failures, Elena said. But you are experiencing that right now. The certification standards did not anticipate this situation. So we need techniques that the standards did not anticipate. She pointed at the control stick. Bank the aircraft 30 degrees to the right. Apply opposite rudder with your feet. Push the nose down 10 degrees. This will create a twisted flight configuration. Aerodynamic forces will help us descend rapidly while staying within speed limits. Marcus hesitated. Every instinct told him this was wrong. Every training class had taught him this was dangerous. But he also knew they were going to die if they did nothing. He banked the aircraft 30 degrees to the right. He applied left rudder. He pushed the nose down. The airplane responded with a sickening sideways slide. The cabin tilted. Passengers felt gravity pushing them to one side. The airplane was no longer flying normally. It was sliding through the sky in a twisted configuration. But the descent rate climbed to 4,000 feet per minute. They were dropping very fast. The aircraft was dropping faster than it should be able to drop with the control systems it had. But Elena was right. The aerodynamic forces created by the twisted configuration were helping them descend. Maintain this configuration, Elena said. She was monitoring the vertical speed indicator. Descend until we pass through 15,000 feet. Then we will gradually return to normal flight. The altimeter was spinning. 33,000 feet. 31,000 feet. 29,000 feet. They were dropping very quickly. Elena keyed the public address system. She pressed the button that let her talk to all 241 passengers. This is Major Elena Valkov speaking from the cockpit, she said. Her voice was calm and confident. I am a former military fighter pilot. I am helping your captain implement emergency procedures. The aircraft is going to make violent maneuvers that commercial planes never perform. This is intentional. This is controlled. We are not giving up. Stay in your seats. Brace yourselves. We are going to live. The passengers heard her voice. They heard the confidence in it. They heard that this woman seemed to know what she was doing. For the first time since the captain announced they were going to die, maybe they had a chance. The descent continued. 27,000 feet. 25,000 feet. 23,000 feet. The airplane was dropping rapidly but steadily. Elena was watching Marcus carefully. She was observing how he was handling the controls. She could see that he was a skilled pilot. He was adapting well to this unusual configuration. He was making small adjustments. He was keeping the aircraft stable even in this twisted position. At 15,000 feet, Elena said, start leveling out. Gradually reduce bank angle. Bring the nose up slowly. Transition back to normal flight. Marcus worked the controls with gentle, careful inputs. The descent rate decreased. The bank angle decreased. The nose came up. At 12,000 feet, they were level again. The descent rate was 0. The aircraft was flying almost normally, except they still had minimal hydraulic power and one engine was on fire. Status check, Elena said. How much fuel left? 8,000 pounds, Sarah reported. We dumped 34,000 pounds in about 6 minutes. Perfect, Elena said. That is enough to reach Peterson. Now, both of you need to understand something. We cannot land this aircraft normally. We do not have enough control authority for a precision approach. We are going to land using what military pilots call a tactical approach. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means we are going to land harder and faster than normal, Elena said. But the aircraft is designed to handle that. Your landing gear can absorb descent rates up to 600 feet per minute. We are going to land at 500 feet per minute. Your aircraft can handle that. After we land, the emergency crews will put out the fire. Our job is to get to that runway. Peterson Air Force Base was now 40 miles away. They were descending slowly. The aircraft was handling better now that it was lighter. Sarah was monitoring the fuel gauges. The fuel was running low. They had maybe enough for one approach attempt. Elena looked at the navigation display. She was planning the final maneuver. Here is what will happen, Elena said to both pilots. We are going to stay high and stay fast as long as possible. We will cross over the field at 8,000 feet doing 300 knots. That is far too high and far too fast for any normal landing. That is true, Marcus said. We would overshoot the runway. We are not going to overshoot, Elena said. Because we are going to perform a tactical overhead brake. When we reach the field, we are going to bank hard left. We are going to spiral down over the runway. We are going to lose altitude rapidly while losing speed through the turn. It is going to feel like we are falling. But we are not falling. We are doing a controlled descent. Sarah looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Sarah. This sounds like a crash landing, Sarah said. It will be a crash landing, Elena said. But you will survive a crash landing on the runway much better than you will survive falling from the sky over the countryside. Elena's voice became more serious. I need you both to commit to this, she said. Commit completely. No hesitation. No second guessing. If you hesitate, we die. I have done this before. I have brought damaged military aircraft home using these exact techniques. I know it works. But only if you commit completely. Marcus and Sarah looked at each other. They had been flying together for 3 years. They trusted each other completely. Now they had to trust a stranger. But they also knew they were going to die if they did not trust her. We are committed, Marcus said. Tell us exactly what you need us to do. Good, Elena said. Then we have maybe a 60% chance of survival. That is infinitely better than 0. They were 20 miles from Peterson now. They could see the runway in the distance. It was a long gray line cutting through the Colorado landscape. Emergency vehicles were already positioned along its length. Foam trucks were waiting. They were ready. Elena keyed the radio one final time. Peterson Tower, this is Flight 2847. We are beginning our final approach. This will be an unconventional approach. We will be executing a tactical overhead brake. Expect us to be high and fast. We will spiral down over the runway. We will land with a hard impact. Have all emergency equipment ready. The tower responded, Flight 2847, you are cleared for any approach you need. Emergency equipment is ready. We are standing by. Elena keyed the public address system one more time. This is Major Valkov, she said to all the passengers. We are beginning our final approach to Peterson Air Force Base. The airplane is going to bank very steeply. The airplane is going to descend very rapidly. This is exactly what we intend to do. This is controlled and intentional. Do not panic. When the flight attendants signal, move into brace positions. We will impact the runway hard. But you will survive. Remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop. We are going to make it. They were crossing the approach end of the runway at 8,000 feet traveling at 320 knots. Impossibly high. Impossibly fast. No commercial airplane ever lands this way. Bank hard left now, Elena commanded. As hard as your controls allow. Nose down 15 degrees. Maximum bank. We are going to spiral down fast. Marcus banked the aircraft hard to the left. His degraded controls responded sluggishly, but they responded. The airplane rolled into a steep left turn. The passengers felt it immediately. The world tilted sideways. They could see the runway directly below them through the windows. The airplane was spiraling down like a corkscrew. Passengers screamed. They were being pressed into their seats by the centrifugal force. Flight attendants were shouting brace commands. Everyone knew this was not a normal landing. The descent rate climbed to 3,000 feet per minute. The aircraft was dropping very fast. "Steeper," Elena said. "More bank. You are not turning tight enough. We need to lose altitude faster or we will overshoot the runway." Marcus pushed harder. The aircraft banked steeper. The spiral tightened. The runway grew larger below them. 7,000 feet. They were dropping through 7,000 feet. 6,000 feet. 5,000 feet. The runway was rotating below them as they spiraled. Emergency vehicles were tracking their descent. Fire trucks were getting ready. Foam trucks were getting ready. 4,000 feet. 3,000 feet. The runway was very large now. They were dropping straight toward it. "Start rolling out," Elena said when they hit 1,500 feet. "Gradually reduce bank angle. Bring the nose up slowly. We are going to roll out on final at 500 feet. Speed is good. Altitude is good. We are going to make this." Marcus rolled the wings level with aching slowness. The degraded controls responded just enough to align them with the runway's centerline. The aircraft stabilized in something approaching a normal approach configuration. But they were 500 feet high and still traveling at 240 knots. That was 70 knots faster than normal approach speed. The runway threshold was rushing toward them. The concrete was getting larger. The wind was streaking past the fuselage. "Do not flare," Elena said firmly. "You will not have enough control authority to stop the descent properly. Just fly it straight into the runway. Let the landing gear absorb the impact. Maintain 500 feet per minute descent rate exactly. Do not try to soften the landing." Marcus wanted to pull back on the control stick. Every instinct screamed at him to do that. Every training class had taught him to flare the aircraft gently before landing. But he trusted Elena. He kept the stick steady. The runway was very close now. 100 feet. 50 feet. They could see the concrete surface. The main landing gear hit the runway at 490 feet per minute. It was hard. It was very hard. The whole airframe shuddered. The landing gear compressed to its design limits. Passengers were thrown forward against their seatbelts. Luggage flew out of overhead bins. But the aircraft did not break. The landing gear did its job. It absorbed the impact. The nose landing gear slammed down 2 seconds later. Marcus immediately deployed the thrust reversers on the one remaining engine. He pressed the brakes as hard as he could. The anti-skid system pulsed beneath his feet. The aircraft was slowing down. Foam trucks were racing alongside them, spraying white foam on the wings. The foam covered the fuel leaks. The foam covered the engine fire. The foam was preventing any fires from igniting. The speed dropped. 200 knots. 150 knots. 100 knots. 50 knots. They still had 3,000 feet of runway remaining when the aircraft came to a complete stop. For a moment, there was absolute silence in the cockpit. Just the sound of warning horns and foam still being sprayed. Then Marcus started laughing. He was crying and laughing at the same time. His whole body was shaking with relief and emotion. Sarah was crying too. Tears were running down her face. They were alive. All 241 passengers were alive. All 12 crew members were alive. Nobody was dead. Elena stood between the two pilot seats. She looked at them with an expression that mixed relief with satisfaction. "You both did perfectly," she said. "You trusted me when every instinct told you not to. You executed flawlessly. You are both excellent pilots." The emergency slides were deployed. Passengers began coming down the slides onto the runway. Some walked on their own. Some needed help from flight attendants. Some were in shock, unable to believe they were alive. Medical personnel were waiting. Police were waiting. Fire trucks were waiting. Air Force security was waiting. In the cockpit, Marcus looked at Elena. His eyes were filled with gratitude and amazement. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Really? Who are you?" Elena smiled slightly. It was a smile that carried weight. A warrior's smile. "Major Elena Valkov," she said. "Retired. 12 years with the Russian Air Force. 2,000 hours of combat experience. Multiple combat deployments in Syria, Ukraine, and places that officially do not exist." "Russian?" Sarah said, with surprise in her voice. "Russian," Elena confirmed. "I flew Su-35 fighters. I flew combat missions against surface-to-air missiles and enemy fighter aircraft. I was shot down once over Aleppo. I brought the aircraft home on one engine with hydraulics failing and half my instruments dead. What you experienced on this flight was a manageable emergency by military standards." Marcus stood up, his legs still shaky. He extended his hand. Elena shook it firmly. "You saved 241 lives," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "I had already given up. I told everyone they were going to die. And you walked into my cockpit and refused to accept that death was inevitable. I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me," Elena said. "You did exactly what I needed you to do. You trusted tactical guidance that violated everything you had been taught. You executed with the skill of an excellent pilot. That is all that mattered." Within hours, the news was everywhere. Cameras and helicopters were circling Peterson Air Force Base. The story was on every news channel in America and around the world. A commercial airplane had crashed and somehow survived. A mystery passenger had saved 241 lives. Within 6 hours, Elena's identity was revealed. Her military background was exposed. Suddenly, people knew her face. People knew her name. People knew her whole story. Elena did not like this. She had wanted invisibility. But now she was famous. The NTSB began an investigation. The National Transportation Safety Board is a government agency that investigates all airplane accidents. They looked at every decision. They looked at every procedure. They looked at every action Elena had taken. An investigator named Thomas Crawford interviewed Elena. "You violated multiple FAA regulations," he said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "Fuel dumping without clearance. Aggressive maneuvering outside the aircraft's certified flight envelope. An approach that exceeded maximum descent rates. Under normal circumstances, this would result in certificate action against you and against the pilots." Elena met his gaze directly. She did not look away. "Under normal circumstances, 241 people would be dead," she said. "You would be investigating a smoking crater instead of sitting here talking to survivors. I understand that my methods violated regulations that exist for good reasons. Those regulations assume that conventional procedures are available and effective. They do not account for situations where conventional procedures have already failed and death is the only alternative to unconventional action. I made tactical decisions based on combat experience that proved accurate. Everyone survived." Crawford smiled slightly. It was the first genuine expression Elena had seen on his face. "I am not here to punish anyone," he said. "I am here to understand what happened so we can improve aviation safety." And what happened is that military tactics saved lives that civilian procedures could not save. He paused, then added, for the record, I flew F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam. I know exactly what you did up there, and I know how much skill it required. You have my respect. The 241 passengers began organizing immediately. They created a survivors group. They wanted to publicly thank the woman who had saved their lives. They arranged a press conference 3 days after the emergency landing. The ballroom was packed with media. Cameras. Reporters. News crews. Elena attended reluctantly, wearing civilian clothes that did nothing to hide her military bearing. Marcus was there. Sarah was there. The survivors were there. Marcus stood at the podium. He spoke with raw emotion about what had happened in the cockpit. He described how he had given up. How Elena had walked in and refused to accept death. Passengers spoke about their terror when they thought they would die. About the violent maneuvers that proved Elena knew exactly what she was doing. Then Elena stepped to the podium. She was uncomfortable with the attention. But she recognized that these people deserved to hear directly from her. I did not save you to become a hero, she began. Her accent was noticeable. It reminded everyone that she was foreign. I saved you because I was on the aircraft and I had skills that could help. Doing nothing would have meant dying with you, which I have always been too stubborn to accept. She paused, choosing her words carefully. What happened was not magic, Elena continued. It was the application of tactical principles that military aviation developed through decades of combat experience. Through pilots dying in situations that seemed unsurvivable until someone survived and taught others how they did it. She looked out at the 241 faces who were alive because of her. Combat aviation is fundamentally different from civilian aviation, Elena said. Commercial pilots are taught to operate within safe boundaries. To follow procedures that minimize risk. To maintain standards that keep millions of passengers safe every day. Fighter pilots are taught to operate beyond normal boundaries when survival requires it. To make decisions that accept significant risk because the alternative is certain death. To use our aircraft as weapons that we push to their absolute limits. She paused again. What I did in that cockpit, ordering fuel dumps that violated environmental regulations, directing maneuvers that exceeded structural limitations, planning an approach that required flying straight into the runway, those actions would be unacceptable in normal operations. They were only acceptable because normal operations had already failed. Elena looked directly at Marcus. You did not fail as a captain, she said. You simply reached the limits of what commercial aviation training prepares you for. When you announced we were dead, you were absolutely correct based on everything you knew. The fault is not with you. The fault is that aviation training segregates civilian and military knowledge so completely that commercial pilots never learn combat survival techniques that could save them in extreme emergencies. 2 years after the emergency landing, Elena was standing on a hotel balcony in Denver. She was looking out at the city. Aircraft were coming in to land. Their landing lights were cutting through the darkness of the evening sky. Marcus came and stood beside her. They did not need to say anything. They just stood together. Two pilots who had shared something that nobody else could understand. Something that had changed both of their lives forever. After a long time, Marcus asked, "Do you regret it? Walking into that cockpit? Revealing who you are? Everything that followed?" Elena considered the question carefully. She thought about the privacy she had lost. She thought about the attention she had never wanted. She thought about the constant awareness that she would be defined by those 15 minutes. But she also thought about 241 people who were alive. She thought about their families. She thought about the children who would grow up to have children of their own. "No," Elena said finally. "I do not regret it. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that you had to feel like a failure when you had actually done everything right. I regret that aviation training is so segregated that skills which could save lives are treated as dangerous secrets. But I do not regret saving you. I became a fighter pilot because I believed in protecting people. I retired because I got tired of the ways military service requires hurting people to protect others. Walking into your cockpit let me protect people without hurting anyone. That is rare. That is worth whatever price I have paid. Marcus nodded slowly. His eyes were distant with memories of that terrible day. You taught me something, he said. You taught me that sometimes the only thing separating impossible from possible is someone willing to try unconventional solutions when conventional wisdom has failed. I fly differently now. I think differently. I understand that procedures are tools for normal situations, but that abnormal situations might require abnormal responses. You changed how I think about being a captain. Good, Elena said quietly. Because maybe next time, you will not need someone like me walking into your cockpit. You will already know that unsurvivable does not mean you stop fighting. You will already understand that sometimes saving lives requires doing things that scare you. That is the real lesson from what happened. Not that I saved you, but that you trusted me enough to implement solutions you had never imagined. That is the skill that matters. The story of Flight 2847 became famous all over the world. It was studied in aviation schools. It was discussed by pilots. It was debated by safety experts. It inspired some people and made others uncomfortable. But for the 241 people who survived, the story was simple: they were alive. A woman with a hidden past had saved their lives. A captain who thought he had failed had actually succeeded by trusting someone he did not know. And they would all spend the rest of their lives grateful. Sometimes in life, the person sitting next to you is not just a regular passenger. Sometimes they carry skills and experiences that could save you. Sometimes they are exactly what the world needs when everything falls apart. That is what happened on Flight 2847. That is why this story matters. That is why we remember Elena Valkov, the fighter pilot who became an angel in Seat 17C.